everybody, and welcome to Baphomet's Lounge. I'm your host, the incomparable NSS, joined tonight by my trusty old pitbull Aspen. Ooh, what happened here? Did you get hurt yourself? Old girl. Oh, poor girl. What we got here? Yeah, she's getting old, folks. 13, lucky 13, yeah. First off, let me take a little slug off my frosty cold Baphomet's Lounge pint glass. You may be asking yourself, wow, that is so cool. Oh, you look just so content with it. Where could I get one? Well, not only do we got pint glasses, we've got koozies, we've got coasters at the Baphomet's Lounge store. Down below, I got links right there, or if you go to Baphomet'sLounge.com, you can get yourself stuff from our online store. Thank you very, very much in advance for your patronage. So, that being said, last week I kind of talked about LPs versus CDs, and I kind of bandied about a couple of words, remixing and remastering. And I wanted to kind of get into more in depth with that. So mastering basically is making something sound for the medium that it's being placed on. So when I kind of talked about that with albums, you can't get them too low bass here, too high. With tape cassettes, sometimes you have to push the highs even more because of the noise on the tape cassettes. With CDs, you know, you can master it with the full dynamic range and the full spectral range, of course, of our hearing, not dog hearing here. See, she can hear that. So remastering, what they've done is, the best way to describe it, mastering is if you've got a table and the table's built and you're kind of putting a coat of varnish on the table. You're making it that last bit that's the shiny, slick part that allows it to become, ready for market. Mixing is actually building the table. So if you've got a crooked table, you can remaster it all you want, it's still crooked. You know, you could add all the varnish, it's crooked. Remixing is readjusting the table. So what I was glad a lot of times is, like I said, that they were remastering stuff like they had done the Elton John original albums. They'd gone through and found the original tapes, sucked them into the computer, and then applied, when they mastered it, they got the full spectral range, and they found all of the frequencies and compression and stuff to make it as great as it could sound. Okay, you know, you do have, you know, some of the stuff recorded in the 70s, you had tape hiss and noise and all that other stuff that was involved. The remaster just basically put the varnish on there. It couldn't fix the problems if there was a problem in there, but it allowed it to just sound better and maybe more like they had intended it to sound, but due to the fact that they have, different, constraints, with albums and with cassettes and what have you, now they felt that they can make it sound truly on the proper medium, the CD. See my argument of last week. Remixing is when they find the original tapes and they grab the individual sounds and readjust them. This is where, and this has been the rage lately, this is where I kind of have a problem. I like it and I don't like it. And I'll give you a couple examples. Pearl Jam's 10. Pearl Jam was an unknown band. When they recorded that album, they were one of 10 other bands that had gotten a recording contract. The album comes out and explodes. I mean, they probably recorded it at a simple studio with, some producer, engineer, just El Cheapo, right? And of course they blow up. Little interesting side note: Pearl Jam was my band at the time. I was in a band called Dionysus back in the '90s, and they were going to play a club called the Scrapyard in Buffalo, New York. And the guy said, "I got Pearl Jam coming." Dror Cohn, the owner, and that was in January. By March, they were too big to play clubs in Buffalo. That's how huge they shot up. So their second album, they got producer Brendan O'Brien versus, and he. Obviously, since then, as they skyrocketed to fame, they got real producers and, paid bigger studio time and what have you. So recently, they actually went back to the original tapes and they remixed those tapes because they always never liked that mix of the first album. And they had Brendan O'Brien remix the first album. I think it sounds stellar. I absolutely, utterly love the remix. I can't stand the original mix. You know, it's very amateur. You know, it was what it was. It's like my old albums that I recorded, you know, 20 years ago in a, you know, simple 12-track studio. We had only so much equipment, all that other stuff. It was for the time, for the budget, for what they were, okay? And now that they have the money, and it was the largest album they ever had, they wanted to actually present it in the right, you know, the right way, I guess. You know, give a chance to really maybe make it shine the way it should have. And they did a fantastic job. I love the remix. Now remember, remixing changes, you know, Brendan O'Brien still kept the tone of the album. He just made it better, you know. ZZ Top in the 80s, and I hated it, and they had an album, ZZ Top 6-pack, and I got rid of it because I was pissed what they did, and they finally re-released just the remasters. They went back to their early albums, the first 5 or 6 albums. Okay, you got to remember, ZZ Top had the success with Eliminator and all the dance beats and stuff. So they took like the first albums, they went in and even like re-recorded the drums on like digitally and all that stuff. You know, they punched up the sound. It just sounded awful. I hated it. Okay, it sounded terrible. It was I got rid of the 6-pack in as much as I love the bands because I hated those mixes. And until recently, when they re-released those albums, remastered, like I said, a new coat of varnish, but the original sounds. And that's what I enjoyed. Steve Wilson, I can't think of the band he's with, but he's a very prog band. And he has been tasked to remix a lot of albums. I know I think he remixed all the Genesis ones when they remastered them. And I am not familiar with Genesis. I was just happy to have them remastered. So those mixes are the first mix that I've heard, so to speak, or got familiar with. So I love them. They're great. And he is a great engineer. But recently, over Christmas time, I picked up Benefit, my favorite Jethro Tull album from 1970, the year I was born. And I picked up a box set, and I picked up the, not Heavy Horses, North Sea Oil, Stormwatch. And he remixed all 3 of them. Now, the Benefit remix, I had a problem with. And he's a great engineer. And I'll tell you why. He did a great job with the remixes. He did. He honestly did. It wasn't like where ZZ Top went and actually kind of fixed things and changed things around. But in 1970, and you have to remember, like, they did that, like, Kiss's Destroyer. Bob Ezrin went back to remix. Well, you know, nowadays when you get these 24-track, these large studios and all that stuff, they took careful notes, and especially now if it's digitally recorded, like I could take my recordings and push the stems off to somebody, they could remix it. I could just give somebody the raw sounds, and they could readjust, they could re-EQ it, or they could add reverb or add delay. They just have my voice, or my bass, or the guitars, or whatever. Well, in the case with like the Kiss, and with the Benefit, with the Kiss Destroyer, that was actually recorded on 8-track. So in a lot of ways, they only had a lot of the stuff, they printed the effects on, say, the vocal track, or on the guitar track, or whatever. So that voice has the echo, or the delay, already embedded into the sound. So if you remix it, if you decide you want to raise the voice, you bring the echo up with it because it's on that channel. Or if you lower it or whatever, you have to be careful because you have other elements You don't have just the voice itself that you can adjust it, tweak it, compress it, or whatever, because you're affecting the other sounds on it. Well, the same thing with Benefit. When they, from 1970, I don't know if it was recorded on a 4-track or an 8-track, they had a bounce track. So, for example, the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's was recorded on a 4-track. That meant that they recorded 3 of the tracks, then they recorded those 3 tracks, they bounced them together onto 1 track and recorded on the other 2 tracks and bounced it together and sort of kept sub-mixing it. So they kind of had to think ahead when they did that. But what happens is it's a permanent position. Now there's newer technology nowadays where they're starting to be able to adjust things, and that comes with its own set of issues. So the problem with Benefit is that a lot of the sounds were kind of jumbled together because they were bounced or whatever. So the guitar maybe was merged in with another guitar track or an organ track or a saxophone track or a bass track. And the two together kind of formed this additional sound. So when Steve went for the remix, I'm assuming he used some technologies and he started to pull the instruments apart a little bit so that they could have a little more room. So when I heard the remix, I started to hear like the pick sound of the guitar, or I heard the guitar a little bit more defined in the mix. I didn't like it because the sound that I'm accustomed to hearing is this sound here, which is an amalgam of multiple different sounds. A little guitar, a little organ, a little bass, whatever it was smushed together. I didn't like the fact that he pulled it apart a little bit. Now I can hear a guitar sound, and it sounds great, but it's not the sound that I liked hearing, and it didn't, I like sometimes some of those 60s sounds that they used. It's just, that's what it was. So, I would absolutely hate it if, and in technology's going that way, if they had a computer system where they could take the mishmash of Sgt. Pepper's and were able to pull out, this is the bass track, this is Paul's vocal, this is John's vocal, this is, whatever, another, George's guitar, these are the drums, which were recorded, say, in mono, and then they were able to rebuild it in a stereo mix or something like that. I don't know if I'd like that, because I like the way Sgt. Pepper sounds. Yeah, it's got its flaws, because it was 1967. It was recorded in mono. It was what it was, but that's part of the joy of it. And that was my problem with Benefit. Steve Wilson did a great mix on it. He absolutely pulled stuff out and made things a little more defined, but I didn't want to hear them defined. I liked this sound because it was a hunk of other sounds that made what I'm used to listening to good. And this sounds different to me. So therein lies the rub between remixing and remastering. And there is stuff, I'll tell you what. The 80s, I would love to remix Bon Jovi's New Jersey album. I love that album, okay? But in the 80s, the sound was like, take that snare drum and reverb the fuck out of it so that it's like, that was the 80s thing. So every time I hear those songs, they're ruined to me because all I hear is a fucking snare drum. And the 80s was a big thing of like putting that snare drum very prominent. So I got the remasters of a bunch of Springsteen, I think up to like 85 or something like that. And obviously Born in the USA. And I love those Hungry Heart and a lot of the Born in the USA, and a lot of those songs were great. I remember them as a kid. But as I'm listening to them now, I hear that snare drum. Again, not as big as a Bon Jovi, but again, back in the 80s, they were very adamant of that snare's got to be there because people got to dance, fucker. Got to make that people hear that snare and put a reverb on it. Drives me up a fucking wall. Okay? So I would love to remix those albums. I would love to remix it. Maybe take that Bon Jovi New Jersey album and remix it to get a great song out of there without all of that fiddle faddle that was going on. So, but then that means I would change it. So I would almost have to say this is, if I, through Baphomet's Lounge, licensed New Jersey, got the tapes, pulled them into my studio and remixed it to the way I liked it. There would be people out there that would say, like with the Pearl Jam 10, that says, oh, thank you, man, Noel, that's fantastic. You cleared out all this stuff and you brought out the joy of, a great rock album without all the 80s horse shit. And then there'll be people that are like, you ruined it. I love this album. I love this stuff. And you're right. It's just like the Benefit album that Steve Wilson remixed, that it drives me up a wall, and it's nothing against him. He did a great job, but it's not what I like to hear. I want just rematch that. And the Pearl Jam album, which Brendan O'Brien remixed, and finally I could listen to that album and go, oh, that sounds so good. That is the way that album should have sounded. Therein lies the rub. So, gonna have a little drink, folks. Thank you for letting me ramble endlessly about my all-time favorite topic, music. If you're interested, link below to pick up some merchandise and do all that like and subscribe or share with your friends. You could do that too. Such is life. And until the next time, as my puppy snores away, peace.